In the quiet Arizona suburbs of 1971, it, almost impossible to read, were two chilling words: do not develop. A shiver ran down Claire's arms, despite the oppressive heat. It could have been a joke, a silly superstition. But something about that scrawled warning felt profoundly wrong, deeply unsettling. Yet, she found she couldn't put the camera down. $5, the woman at the front said. Claire handed over a 10 and waved away the change. Everything was in its place, yet nothing was as it should be. In the living room, partly hidden by the curtains, sat the family's Polaroid land camera. Its strap was coiled, the lens hazy with fingerprints, the flashbulb spent, a silent observer to the unexplained. This scene wasn't just quiet, it was screaming with absence, a frozen moment in time where an entire family had simply vanished. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no indication of where they went or why. There were no bodies, no horrifying traces of blood, no broken windows or forced doors to suggest a struggle. The initial leads, once promising, dried up, leaving investigators baffled and the community heartbroken. Over time, the Langley house itself became a haunting symbol, just another tragic address with a deeply cold history. In the 1980s, new owners tried to erase the past, gutting the interior, tearing off old wallpaper, replacing floors, and painting over the cheerful nursery. Yet even with these changes, the rooms never seemed to hold warmth. They always felt strangely empty. Renters came and went, never staying long until eventually. The property fell into foreclosure and ended up as a forgotten listing in a dusty estate sale lot. For more than 50 years, no one, not a single soul, understood what truly happened to the Langleys. And in a twist of fate no one could have predicted, no one realized that the Polaroid camera, the one found in the living room, had never actually left the house. Inside its darkness, undisturbed and sealed for over half a century, the film waited patiently. It was still loaded, still holding what might have been the last unseen images the Langley family ever witnessed, a silent, unsettling testament to their last moments. No desperate farewell note, no chilling demand for ransom, just a home abruptly abandoned, as if its inhabitants had stepped out of existence mid-sentence. Within just 48 hours, a desperate search began. Dogs scoured the surrounding areas, helicopters flew overhead, and phone lines buzzed with calls. The mystery of the Langleys quickly gripped not just the local community, but the entire nation, dominating news cycles for weeks. Reporters camped outside the house, their faces grim, while psychics from across the country sent in their eerie theories. Some whispered of cult abductions, others of silent carbon monoxide poisoning, or even the terrifying thought of Edward under immense pressure. Snapping and harming his own family, though no bodies ever surfaced to confirm such a horrific notion. For decades, their disappearance was a cold case, a ghost story whispered through the community, eventually fading into a haunting silence. But then, in 2023, fate intervened. A young woman browsed an estate sale, acquired an antique Polaroid camera, a camera that had once belonged to the very Langley family who disappeared. And deep within its sealed film cartridge, hidden for over half a century, lay images never meant for human eyes. The gentle whir of a ceiling fan, a silent sentinel over a dining table bathed in the fading orange light of a desert. An unsettling stillness hung over the Langley home. This chilling scene was made even more horrifying by what wasn't there. But as the seasons relentlessly turned, that intense public attention, much like the desert heat, slowly began to fade into silence. On the scorching heat of 2023, the kind that makes you feel thick wedged in a dusty corner, beneath a pile of old kitchen towels, sat a milk crate. That night, alone in her quiet apartment, Claire sat at her kitchen table, the vintage camera resting before her. The only light came from a desk lamp, angled directly onto the Polaroid. She meticulously cleaned the lens and replaced the old corroded batteries. The camera hummed faintly as it powered on. No food, no plates, just overturned chairs. The light fixture above tilted slightly, its glass cracked. And in the doorway leading outside, a small shadow, a child, their face turned away. Claire leaned back, utterly stunned. It wasn't just the age of the pictures, or their inherent creepiness. It was as if the family had simply ceased to exist, their home left frozen in time. The building felt cool and gray, a stark contrast to the burning Arizona heat. She signed in, gave her ID, and requested public access microfilm on the Langley case. The clerk, an older woman with sharp, observant eyes, returned a few minutes later with a box labeled Langley E.D. and disappearance case number 719204. The case quickly spiraled into something surreal, fueling bizarre rumors. Whispered tales of cult activity, strange UFO sightings in the desert that week, and even a man who claimed he saw the Langley children walking along a highway with a woman in a yellow dress, though he later recanted after failing a polygraph. But what truly gripped Claire was the final paragraph. It mentioned a Polaroid land camera, model 210, among the household items found at the scene. It was logged as inactive evidence, its film compartment listed as empty. The camera, the article stated, had mysteriously vanished from evidence storage sometime in the 1980s, likely discarded or auctioned during departmental downsizing. Its original chain of custody never recovered. Claire leaned back from her screen, her hands trembling. A cold wave of realization washed over her. The camera she held in her own hands was the camera from the case. And if the film inside was original, it meant those haunting photographs she'd developed had never been seen by the original investigators. This was a terrifying thought. Someone, very likely the person responsible for the Langley's disappearance, had taken those pictures and left the camera behind, assuming the film would never survive. But it had. And now, after over 5 decades, it was finally speaking its silent, chilling truth. It was the overwhelming feeling that she was witnessing something no one was ever meant to find. These photos, she realized with a growing sense of dread, had been taken on a night when something had gone terribly, irrevocably wrong. Claire's fingers hovered over the film door, a moment of intense hesitation. And then she saw it, a faint label stuck to the inside of the strap. Langley, 428 Sycamore Street. The 3 photographs she'd developed lay on her kitchen table, not just pictures, but silent, chilling warnings. She sat cross-legged on her couch, laptop open, her fingers flying across the keyboard, typing every keyword she could think of. Langley family disappearance, 1971 Phoenix. Missing family dinner tables, Sycamore Street, Cold Case, Arizona. She felt a desperate urgency, a need to understand. It didn't take long. Halfway down the stomach clench with a knot of dread. The Langley house. The family that vanished mid-meal. Phoenix, Arizona, September 3rd, 1971. The article was meticulously detailed, disturbing in its raw account. The Langleys were described as a quiet working-class family. Edward, a lineman, Clara, a part-time church secretary, and their 2 children, 5-year-old Beth and 7-year-old Sammy. They had no known debts, no custody battles, no criminal past. Their lives seemed perfectly ordinary, making their disappearance even more unsettling. The last confirmed sighting of the family was at a grocery store around 4:30 p.m. A neighbor recalled seeing Edward watering the front lawn around 6 p.m. By 8 p.m., the lights were on in the house, but no one answered the door. And by morning, as Clara's sister discovered, the house was eerily, profoundly silent. Claire sat perfectly still, her blood running cold. She knew that name. Not from her photography work, not from history books. She knew it from a true crime podcast episode she'd half listened to last year. It was the chilling story of the family who had vanished from their Phoenix home in the 70s. The house that had never been truly resold, the case that had gone cold for decades. She looked down at the photos still developing on her table. The child in the doorway was barefoot, and the shadow stretching toward them was not their own. A terrifying realization dawned on her. The Langleys had not been alone, not develop. The words echoed in her mind. She considered throwing the cartridge away, burying it in a storage box, forgetting it entirely. But that wasn't her nature. Her photographer's mind was already racing, calculating the possibilities. If the film was still usable, and that was a big if, it might hold images from the late 60s or early 70s. It could be nothing, or it could be a treasure. With a sharp crackle, the hardened glue of the tape finally gave way. She loaded the cartridge and pressed the shutter. The camera whirred, a mechanical groan, and the first photo slid out. It was black, just black, either overexposed or simply too old. She laid it on the table and tried again. The second image emerged just as blank, just as dark. But then came the third. As the image slowly began to develop, Claire froze. It was a dining room. A mid-century table, 4-place settings, roast chicken, green beans. The old light fixture, the ceiling fan just visible. It was like stepping back in time. A perfect, frozen moment. But something was terribly wrong. Something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She held the photograph closer, her heart beginning to pound. In the corner, by the very edge of the frame, was a hand. Just fingers. White-knuckled and curled tightly around the table's edge. It wasn't posed. It wasn't smiling. It was gripping. A wave of intense unease washed over her. She took another shot. The camera whirred again, and another photo slid out. This time it was a hallway. Yellow walls, family portraits lining the right side. The perspective was strange, as if the photographer was standing too close to the lens, capturing the scene in a desperate hurry. The final photograph developed slowly, revealing the same room from the first image, but now it was empty. With trembling hands, Claire turned the camera over, searching desperately for any identifying mark. A name, a serial number, anything. Claire couldn't sleep a wink that night. The article went on to explain that when the police arrived, just an hour after the discovery, there were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows, no bloody footprints, and no suicide notes. Driven by an insatiable need for answers, Claire drove to the Phoenix Public Records Office the next morning. As Claire slid the first roll into the viewing machine, old headlines blurred past her eyes. Missing family stuns community, dinner table still set, but where are the Langleys? She paused on an article from September 7, 1971. Camera logged, no further analysis requested. Object considered non-evident. "Are you sitting down?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. She placed the third image, the one with the child and the shadowy figure under a large magnifying glass, tilting her lamp low to catch every detail. She told herself it was just curiosity, but deep down, a chilling intuition twisted in her gut. Claire sat at a corner booth, her camera bag beside her, a recorder discreetly running in her coat pocket. "I still remember that night," he started, his voice hushed. "September 3rd, 1971. I was 10 years old. I lived on Sycamore Street my whole life until I was 20. My dad was a mechanic. My mom taught piano." Lipped his coffee, then looked Claire directly in the eye. "I heard the Langleys vanish, but they didn't vanish, Claire. Somebody took them." Claire remained perfectly still, her heart thudding. "Do you know who?" Thomas glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "I can't say for sure." Thomas's words hung heavy in the air, adding another chilling layer to the mystery. But he said I was imagining things, said I was being dramatic. She parked her car 2 streets away from Sycamore, changing into dark jeans and a black hoodie, a silent uniform for her desperate mission. Her bag was packed lightly, carrying only her camera, a small LED flashlight, latex gloves, and a crowbar, muffled in a towel. This wasn't breaking in, she told herself. It was reclaiming evidence. Something horrific had happened in that house, and if the system wouldn't chase the truth, she would. As she walked the last 2 blocks, a rising wind scattered dry leaves across the sidewalk, mirroring the unsettled feeling in her gut. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, many houses vacant, others to run down for security systems. The Langley house sat like a dark bruise, forgotten and decaying, its porch light long dead. He told me the Langleys probably just went on a trip and forgot to tell someone. The police came the next day, and Thomas, a hopeful child, told them what he saw. Know what they did? Shook his head slowly, a bitter sadness in his eyes. Nothing. He didn't even write it down. One officer patted my head and said I had a vivid imagination, told me not to talk about it to the neighbors. Claire gently took out the digitized photos she'd developed and laid them on the table, flipped over for privacy. Found these in the original camera from inside the house, she said. You need to see them. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She turned them over one by one. The dining table, the hallway, the chilling image of the child in the doorway with the looming figure behind, and then the enhanced crop of the mirror showing the watching face. Thomas stared at them for a long time, his face growing pale. Finally, he exhaled sharply and whispered, Jesus. That's not Edward Langley. Claire confirmed, that's someone else. Maybe the man you saw? He tapped the mirror image, his eyes wide with a new horror. That's not a reflection from inside. Look at the height, the way the eyes are leveled with the hallway trim, the person standing in the wall. Claire blinked, her mind reeling. What do you mean? I mean behind the mirror. That part of the house had an access crawl space, an old one. I remember from when the Langleys had some plumbing redone in '70. My dad helped with the job. The mirror is built into the drywall, but there's room behind it. Claire leaned forward, her voice tight with anticipation. So someone could have been hiding? Thomas nodded slowly. That house has dead spaces, crawl tunnels, storage gaps between walls. It was built cheap and fast in the 50s. It's like a honeycomb in there. Claire's mind raced, a terrifying picture forming. The child in the photo wasn't just in danger. They were being watched from multiple angles, from within the very walls of their home. Claire lowered her voice, the next question, a desperate whisper. Do you know anything about Vernon Dreyfus? Claire waited until just before dusk, the time when shadows begin to lengthen and the world seems to hold its breath. Claire slipped behind the side gate and into the overgrown backyard. With her heart thudding in her chest, Claire made her way towards the hallway. Claire slipped on her latex gloves, pulled out her small flashlight, and crouched down. The opening was impossibly tight, barely 3 feet tall. Angling her headlamp, she slid in on her stomach, pulling herself forward on her elbows. Her hands still trembled, the image seared into her mind. Just after sunrise, she called Thomas Bell, her voice hushed but urgent. I need you to meet me, 10 a.m. sharp. Are you okay? She asked. No, she admitted, but I think I found where they were kept, and I wasn't alone in there. A tense pause stretched between them. Send me the address again, Thomas said, his voice grim. I'll bring a pry bar and a crowbar just in case. They met at a gas station near Sycamore, then walked the remaining blocks in a heavy silence. Claire had come prepared, carrying her camera, gloves, flashlight, and recorder. She also brought a new item, a handheld Geiger counter, which Dominic had mailed overnight from Flagstaff. Not for radiation, but for any unusual electrical or magnetic activity behind the walls. I don't want to be surprised again, she told Thomas, a tremor in her voice. You won't be alone this time, he promised, his jaw tight with grim resolve. They entered the house through the same window as before. Inside, the cold air struck them again, but this time, the smell was stronger, a faint, organic odor, like mold or mildew mixed with the lingering musk of old insulation. Claire led him to the hallway, her flashlight beam cutting through the dimness. This is it, she whispered, pointing to the mirror. The mirror. the hidden spaces behind this panel. Thomas examined the frame, his face serious, then nodded and carefully began to pry it loose. The panel came off cleanly, and the dark tunnel gaped open like a hungry mouth. "You really crawled in there?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Yeah," Claire confirmed, her voice barely audible, "and something was in there with me." Thomas already developed, but curled with age. They weren't just of Beth. Some showed Sammy. Some depicted Clara, still alive, sitting in a chair with her wrists cruelly zip-tied, her eyes closed, her mouth taped shut. One horrifying photo showed all 4 family members, posed stiffly, standing in the dining room. A date was scratched into the border, April 1972. A full 7 months after they had officially vanished. Someone kept them alive. Claire breathed, a mixture of horror and grim hope in her voice. For months, maybe longer. She flipped through the stack of photographs, each one a silent scream. Some images showed them in strange environments: concrete walls, narrow bunks, cold metal doors, a basement, perhaps a fallout shelter. Others were even worse. One disturbing image showed Beth sitting beside an older woman Claire didn't recognize, both wearing matching blue dresses. The girl looked glassy-eyed, vacant, while the woman's face was turned away, obscured. Another photo revealed dozens of cameras, stacked neatly in a wooden cabinet, all different models and ages. They're all pointed towards a single chair in the center of the room. A chilling setup, a studio. "Whoever did this," Thomas murmured, his voice filled with a profound disgust. "They didn't just hide the Langleys, they documented them, every terrifying moment." She coughed as plumes of ancient dust rose around her, but she kept moving, propelled by an almost desperate urge. After what felt like an eternity, perhaps 6 feet, she hit a junction. Another passage branched off sharply to the right towards what would have been the living room wall. She turned, and the beam of her flashlight caught something ahead. Something that wasn't wood or pipe. Something profoundly out of place. She crawled forward until it came into horrifying focus. A cot, metal-framed, covered in filthy, matted blankets. Next to it sat an overturned crate, clearly used as a makeshift table. On it, a water bottle, an old lighter, and a torn comic book. And then, her breath caught in her throat. A Polaroid photo, face down. Claire reached forward, her hand trembling, and picked it up. It was another image from 1971, from the same type of film. This one showed a close-up of a little girl's face, Beth Langley. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she was clearly crying. Her hands were tied in front of her. The background was too dark to make out, but the harsh flash illuminated enough to confirm the unthinkable. The child had been photographed after the disappearance. Claire turned it over, and faded ballpoint pen. Someone had scrawled a chilling message. She still cries, but not for long. A wave of pure, unadulterated panic surged through Claire's throat, a cold, suffocating dread. She instinctively turned off her flashlight, plunging herself into absolute darkness within the cramped, dust-filled space. Holding her breath, she strained her ears, listening intently. And then she heard it, breathing, not her own. It was shallow, raspy, coming from deeper inside the wall, a sound that filled the suffocating silence. Claire backed up slowly, methodically, her elbows scraping against rough insulation, her knees catching on something sharp. She dared not turn her light back on, terrified of what it might reveal. The breathing grew louder, closer, then suddenly stopped, leaving an even more terrifying silence. She crawled faster, her heart hammering against her ribs, her lungs burning for air. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, she twisted out of the crawl space, falling back into the hallway, gasping the area. "There," he said, pointing to a section of the sidewall. "That sidewall runs parallel with the garage. There might be a false wall on the other side." Slowly, cautiously, they backed out of the cramped crawl space and returned to the hallway. They then opened the door that led to the attached garage. The air inside hit them immediately, a potent smell of rot and old paint. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like grotesque drapes, swaying faintly in the disturbed air. The back wall of the garage looked uneven, sloppily painted over, a clear sign of something concealed. Thomas ran his fingers along the molding, a look of grim determination on his face. "Help me," he said. Together they pushed. A soft pop of air escaped as the false panel gave way. Behind it, a narrow, hidden storage space. And in the center, a camera mounted on a tripod pointed directly towards the wall. A light glowed faintly above it, and beneath the lens, a small red button. Claire stepped closer, her heart hammering. It was recording. The light was on. The battery was full. A wire ran from the base into a power outlet built directly into the wall. "Someone's been here," Thomas said, his voice hushed recently. Claire reached out, her fingers brushing the button. The light blinked off, the red indicator now dark. Her heart plummeted with a sickening realization. For that light to have been on, someone had been recording them the entire time they were in the house. A wave of pure, unadulterated terror seized them. There was no time for photos, no more searching. An hour later, Claire met Thomas at a quiet park, the setting sun casting long, uneasy shadows. That night, unable to rest, Claire posted anonymously again on the old cold case forum. The next morning, Claire and Thomas returned to 428 Sycamore. Armed with masks, gloves, headlamps, and bolt cutters, their faces set with a grim purpose. The side window, now a familiar entry point, opened without protest. Now the desert landscape gradually gave way to pine forests, the oppressive heat softening into a cool wind. But the heavy weight in Claire's chest remained. Claire pulled the third photo, a blurry image of a man's back, tall, wearing a black shirt. They parked 2 blocks away this time. No cameras visible, no bags to draw attention. Claire wore a fitted jacket, her audio recorder tucked deep in an inner pocket, a silent witness. Thomas carried nothing but gloves and a roll of duct tape, a grim readiness in his posture. The side window, now a familiar entry point, opened without protest, a groan echoing through the silent house. The air inside felt thicker, heavier than before, as if the very walls knew they were being hunted. They moved directly to the garage. The far wall was damp, a thin copper water line running through the drywall near the floor. Beneath it, precisely where the cryptic message had pointed, they found a loose section of wooden beam, softened by time and moisture. He was standing in front of the fireplace, hunched over something. Behind him, shelves filled with film boxes, photo albums, and what looked terrifyingly like IDs. Passports, laminated cards, names. Claire leaned in, her eyes wide. "I need a loupe." Dominic handed her a magnifier. She studied the shelves, squinting at the IDs. One had the Langley surname, another Charlotte Lee, a third Wendy Stone. Different names, different faces, all young women, all with the same chillingly distant eyes. "Claire," Dominic said, his voice suddenly taut with alarm. image of a shoe and fireplace gnawed at her. A chilling premonition. She didn't call ahead. Dominic owed her more than one favor and knew better than to ask questions. Inside his university basement lab, used for restoring fire-damaged documents, Claire pulled on gloves and carefully laid the cartridge on the table. It was a Polaroid 108 pack, extremely rare, its chemicals likely unstable. Yet there was a chance. She gently peeled the paper seal, and with a soft hiss of dried adhesive, the dull silver roll inside gleamed. "Still intact?" Dominic asked, watching from the corner, his eyes wide with anticipation. Surprisingly, she breathed. She loaded it into a restored camera, identical to the one from the Langley house, and pressed the shutter. The camera whirred mechanically, and a photograph slid out into her hand. Black expired. She laid it aside and tried again. Another whir. This one developed slowly, not black, not empty. She turned it toward the light and froze. It was Beth Langley, but older. She stood barefoot on a concrete floor, wrapped in a blanket, her face half-shadowed. Small chain dangled from her right ankle, barely visible near the floor. Behind her, the unmistakable outline of a fireplace. The very same one from the burned photograph. Claire's voice was tight with a mix of horror and relief. "This is post-1971, at least by a decade." "She survived," Dominic whispered. "He kept her alive." Claire shook her head, a new, terrible realization dawning. "No, not just alive." He raised her. She developed the next shot. It was Beth again, sitting at a table, a Polaroid camera in front of her. But she wasn't looking at it. Her gaze was fixed past it, towards someone, towards whoever was holding the real camera. Her expression was utterly blank. Not afraid, not angry, just profoundly resigned. The air inside felt heavier, almost alive, as if the house knew it was being hunted. They went straight to the garage. The far wall was damp, and a thin copper water line ran through the drywall near the floor. Beneath it, precisely where the cryptic message had indicated, they found a loose section of wood beam, softened by time and neglect. Claire pried it back. Inside, she saw a cloth bundle tied tightly. She pulled it free, her hands trembling with anticipation and dread. Inside the bundle were 4 unsettling items. A roll of undeveloped Polaroid film, a small pendant necklace with a cracked locket, a burned photograph only a scorched edge remained, showing what looked like a boy's shoe and part of a fireplace, and a note folded, yellowed with age, written in a woman's hand. Claire unfolded it with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the faded ink. "To whoever finds this, we are still here. He won't let us leave. He makes us pose. He makes us lie. He says if we smile, he'll bring food. If we scream, he turns off the lights. I don't know if anyone remembers us, but if you do, find Beth, please. Clara Langley." Claire stared at the signature, her vision blurring with tears. Thomas reached for her shoulder, his own voice thick with emotion. "We found them," he said softly. "Even if it's too late, we found them." Claire wiped her eyes, a fierce resolve replacing her tears. "No, we're not done. 'Cause if Beth's still alive, he might still have her." And somewhere, waiting to be developed, was the last photograph. Claire drove straight from Sycamore Street to her friend Dominic's lab in Flagstaff, a 4-hour drive north. Next one. her hand reaching out. She touched the button. The light blinked off, the red indicator now dark. Her heart dropped, a cold dread washing over her. For that light to have been on, someone had been recording them the entire time they were in the house. She pulled it free, her breath catching in her throat. The bundle held 4 chilling items: a roll of undeveloped Polaroid film, a small pendant necklace, with a cracked locket, a burned photograph, and a note, folded, yellowed with age, written in a woman's hand. Claire unfolded it with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the faded ink. To whoever finds this, we are still here. He won't let us leave. He makes us pose. He makes us lie. He says if we smile, he'll bring food. If we scream, he turns off the lights. I don't know if anyone remembers us, but if you do, find Beth, please. Clara Langley. Claire stared at the signature until her vision blurred, tears welling in her eyes. Thomas reached for her shoulder, his voice thick with profound sadness. We found them, he said softly, a poignant admission. Even if it's too late, we found them. Claire wiped her eyes, a fierce resolve replacing her sorrow.
Well, we were wait, where, why now? Why are you, we why with my, we were, and we rescued to save Brown, and where are we, why when?
Because if Beth's still alive, he might still have her. And somewhere, waiting to be developed, was the last photograph. As they pushed, a soft pop of air escaped as the false panel in the garage gave way. Panic seized them. They fled instantly. No thought for more photos or further searching. An hour later, her mind reeling, Claire met Thomas at a park near the freeway. The next morning, driven by the unbearable weight of her discoveries, Claire filed an official report with the Prescott Police Department under her own name, not yet. She meticulously created a secure, encrypted folder, time-stamped and cataloged all the audio clips, photographs, and GPS data she had gathered. Using a burner laptop from a library computer, she submitted everything anonymously. She carefully filed them in a folder marked Witness, Child of House. Calder, a woman in a brown suit with no jewelry, had an office decorated only with a single framed newspaper. Clipping of a solved child abduction case from 1983. She hadn't gone back to Sycamore Street. She couldn't. But she had the drawings, the tapes, the voice, and now the names. She pulled out her notebook, starting a list. Beth Langley, Clara Langley, Samuel Langley, Wendy Stone, Charlotte Lee, Leah Anton, Rachel Black, Eden Avery girls whose faces had appeared in those frames. Some blurry, some posed, some screaming. All frozen in that house, in that horrifying system. Then she added one more name to her list. The girl in the mirror. No official name yet, no birth certificate, no fingerprints on record, only drawings and silence. But she was real, and she had survived. She offered Claire tea, which Claire declined, and then got straight to the point. We believe the man behind the camera was not Vernon Dreyfus, Calder stated, her voice calm but firm, but someone who worked with him. Possibly inherited his material, possibly even his methods. Claire nodded. There were dozens of names in those negatives, she confirmed. Some had dates well into the 1990s. This didn't end with the Langleys, no, Calder said, a grave expression on her face. And we're investigating that now. She paused, then asked, would you be willing to consult? Claire blinked, surprised. Me. You found her, Calder replied, her gaze steady. You made the noise we couldn't. That child was weeks away from starving. Your work gave her time. Claire felt her throat tighten, unable to speak. Dobb 1977. Disappeared from a rest stop outside of Tucson in 1985, Calder said. Never found. We believe she may have been housed in the same system. Same cellar layout. We think Beth may have been forced to care for her. Claire swallowed, the horror of the realization hitting her. So she wasn't alone down there. Calder shook her head slowly. No, none of them were. Some drawings depicted meals eaten in chilling silence, of being taught to speak only when spoken to, of being forced to reenact poses from old Polaroids, mimicking her mother and others, again and again, until the image is repeated like a twisted scripture. That night, Claire uploaded her final episode for the Publica podcast, titled simply, The House and the Photograph. She included the voice from the recorder, the photos, the drawings, the tape from the crawl space. She redacted names and blurred faces to protect identities, but she told the truth. And by morning, the world was listening. Claire's podcast hit 1 million downloads in 3 days, not because it was sensational, but because it was real, raw, human. She didn't dramatize the story. She simply presented the truth. How a family disappeared in 1971. How a photograph reemerged 52 years later, and how a daughter born in terrifying silence watched the world from behind a mirror waiting for rescue. Claire purposefully left out names and protected the girl's location, choosing not to reveal where the Langley house was. But she did include one audio clip, just 18 seconds, the girl's voice. Quiet, echoing through the recorder. I came from pictures, but pictures don't hug back. That single line spread across the internet like wildfire. Forums dissected it, advocates amplified it, and survivors of captivity, abuse, and loss reached out to her by the hundreds. But not everyone believed. Some called it fake, a performance. Others accused her of fabricating evidence, staging the crawl space. One anonymous email simply read, "Truth doesn't come from ghosts." Claire ignored the noise. She knew what she'd seen, what she'd heard, and what the girl had drawn in charcoal over and over again. The man with the camera. The authorities officially released only a partial report of the case. They acknowledged the discovery of a child inside a sealed portion of a condemned home in Prescott Valley, stating she was nonverbal at first, malnourished, but stable. With an estimated age of 11, DNA linked her to Beth Langley. The official report carefully avoided words like captive or project, but Claire knew better. The girl hadn't just been locked away. She'd been raised under constant surveillance, programmed to reenact, taught to mimic the same poses her mother had been forced into again and again, until the images repeated like a chilling scripture. She flagged the contents with a chilling urgency. Possible evidence. Child in danger, suspected female minor in concealed space at 428 Sycamore Street, believed born in captivity, psychological and physical risk ongoing, immediate intervention required. She included one audio file, the man's chilling voice from the cellar on. One photo, the girl's haunting reflection in the mirror.
Ice.
She watched the progress bar inch towards 100%, then closed the browser and left. By midday, police cars had surrounded the Langley house. Claire parked 2 streets away and watched from a nearby hilltop through binoculars. 6 officers, a police van, and a crime scene tent erected over the front yard. The window she had used to enter was now boarded shut. A woman in a department windbreaker spoke to someone with a clipboard. Another man, likely from Child Protective Services, stood with a medic at the side entrance. Claire's chest tightened, a surge of adrenaline mixed with a fragile hope. Then she saw her, the girl wrapped in a silver thermal blanket, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disorienting light, barefoot on the grass. She was holding a small stuffed rabbit, her hair matted, but she was alive. Claire watched as paramedics approached gently. The girl didn't resist. She didn't cry. She just kept glancing over crayons scattered around her. She didn't speak much yet, answering sometimes with nods, other times with pencil drawings in a blank notebook they'd given her. She drew a sun, a field, a small house with blue shutters. But the story of the Langley family, and the brave young woman we now know as Lily, continues to echo, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight. We found a small piece of the truth, a desperate plea from the past, and a glimmer of hope for a future. Yet, as always with such profound mysteries, questions linger in the quiet corners of our minds. Then, in the bottom corner, almost as an afterthought, she drew a woman's thin gray dress, hollow eyes, watching from the edge of the field. And what kind of life awaits Lily as she slowly steps out of the shadows and into the sun? Her name was written in faint, perfect handwriting, Miss July. It reminds us of the strength of those who endure, and the relentless courage of those who seek the truth, no matter how unsettling it may be. If this story touched you, if it made you think, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us bring more hidden truths to light. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and always remember, sometimes the pictures truly do speak 1,000 words. The case had never mentioned that name. Claire would see the drawing the next morning and freeze. Because in the photo archives recovered from the crawl space weeks earlier, one of the photo boxes had been labeled July Series, Initiation. And next to it, in another child's drawing, Miss July always smiles. The frame widened. The mystery deepened. And the house still stood empty now, but never silent. Today, she had drawn a window. Through the glass, a woman was reaching in, arms outstretched, a camera hanging at her side, unopened. Lily had drawn herself on the other side of the window, reaching back. Above the image, she had written just one word: found. Claire stood on the other side of the glass, a two-way mirror separating her from the child. She didn't wave, she didn't cry, she just watched. The therapist beside her spoke softly. "We've started calling her Lily. Is that her name?" "No," the woman said. "She won't give us one. But she liked it when we said it, so it stuck." Claire nodded. The room was warm, bright, filled with toys and soft music. A stark contrast to the concrete cellar Lily had lived in for years. "She's drawing more now," the therapist added, "every day. And yesterday, she asked for colored pencils." Claire smiled faintly, a quiet hope blossoming in her chest. "She's coming back to herself," she said, "or maybe finding who she was supposed to be." 3 weeks later, Claire received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside, a VHS tape, a pair of gloves, and a single Polaroid photograph. It showed the side of a different house, a boarded window with faint handprints on the inside of the glass. She played the VHS tape on an old deck at the university archive. The screen was static at first, then a basement, a woman tied to a chair. The date in the corner? 1986. The name scrolled at the bottom. Wendy Stone. Claire watched for 6 minutes, and stopped. She placed the tape in an evidence bag and took it straight to Agent Calder's office. "They're still out there," Claire said, her voice firm. "This wasn't one man, it was a network." Calder looked grim. "We think you're right. And now we have our first traceable location. Tucson," Claire nodded. "I want to be involved." "You already are," Calder replied. That night, Claire recorded her final episode in the house, in the photograph series. She titled it, Log 7, Exit Frame. The girl from the cellar has a name now. She walks in daylight. She draws in color. But her past still lives in the shadows, rooms lined with cameras, corners taped with secrets. Beth Langley died beneath her own house, but her daughter lived, and her drawings told us more than photos ever could. This isn't the end. It's just the last frame of one reel. The projector keeps spinning. The watchers are still out there, and now we watch them back. She paused, then added one final line. For Beth, for Lily, for the ones we missed. We see you now. Epilogue. 2 months later, at an undisclosed location, Lily sat at a desk, crayons scattered around her, and so our journey through the house in the photograph comes to an end, for now. What other secrets still remain buried, unheard, are the other watchers in this chilling network? This case reminds us that sometimes the most ordinary-looking homes can hold the deepest, most terrifying secrets. Thank you for joining us on this deeply personal and unsettling investigation.